Got my PJ outfit on.
Yeah, nice outfit. Hi everyone, we're now recording. So everyone watching, this is Ada Paris, and there are so many things that we can discuss from so many different angles. One thing I am going to do is whatever we discuss, I'm going to link to your brilliant article that you wrote on Medium on July the 13th called Escaping Plato's Cave. So wherever we go from this conversation, I'm certainly going to link to that because it's legendary.
Thank you.
Tell me, what's exciting right now?
Okay, so it is the idea of escaping Plato's Cave that's exciting me right now. It's interesting. It's been 5 years. I've been kind of ruminating, and I tend to mind map. When I get an idea that pops into my head, I tend to mind map it first and I have to get it out. And then I start to look for patterns. And so that was 5 years of mind mapping and getting to this idea and then starting to speak to people about it. Mm-hmm. And some people thought I was a bit bonkers. No, you shouldn't talk about it. But actually a bit more. So the idea is that I believe that a lot of Western society are looking for a new religion through the use of technology. Mm-hmm. Let me pull back on that. So what I mean by technology is we have to go right back to the basics, that technology is a tool. Mm-hmm. It's a medium. And so by that definition, we have quantum technology, digital, we have plant technology, we have metaphysical, anything that is a tool that can help us in a process is technology.
Yes.
And what I mean by religion is that we are looking for something bigger than ourselves that will help us connect with ourselves first, connect with our environment, which to me is the earth or the planet, and then to connect with each other. And so I started to see these patterns from, I look at, I emerge in different worlds. So technology, creativity, quantum physics, Burning Man communities, all of these different communities. And what I noticed was that a lot of people were using very similar language. And so that's when I started to make the connections. And then when I started to look at the people who inspire me, who are doing different things or who are raising their voices and trying to change the status quo of things, I noticed that they actually had very similar characteristics. And so the idea of Plato's Cave is, for those who don't know the story, there are people in the cave, they are seeing shadows in the wall, and that is the thing, that is what the world is like. One person escapes the cave, goes and climbs out the cave, sees a new reality, sees a different reality, and decides to go back and try and convince the people who are in the cave that this is the different reality, this is what's real. And for me, that was a really beautiful story analogy for what I see happening. And so it's thrown me down quite a few rabbit holes, a few more mind maps have come up.
Mm-hmm. No kidding. And so tell me, there's so much to explore in that. Let's actually start. So ontologically, let's start from the metaphor itself. So in the story, the guy that escapes from the cave sees the world for what it actually is, and then comes back and tries to explain to the prisoners that they're prisoners. Do we feel that there is are you suggesting, and I want to bring myself into this kind of dialogue as well by saying that I think we are kind of suggesting that people are increasingly aware that we are inside some form of pattern or program, and is that where we are in evolution in terms of this increased awareness? And just before you answer that, is that synonymous with the seeking of something greater than ourselves?
So yes, I mean, as I said, I can throw myself down different rabbit holes, because yes, the idea that when the person escapes the cave, what they see is real. What does that mean? I think all of it is based on perspective.
Yes.
But it means that we have a perspective. When you escape the cave, you have a perspective that is wider than your current reality. So
Yeah.
you're outside, you're able to look bigger and see things from a more holistic perspective.
So what about if the guy that I say a guy escapes the cave, which is massively
Or which is why I've been saying person.
person. So let's say a person escapes the cave.
Yeah.
They see reality for what it is, or a wider perspective of reality.
Yeah.
But then they walk for 50 meters and they hit the edge of a structure, and they realize that it's actually they're inside a biosphere.
Okay.
So could it be the case?
So,
Yeah, could it be the case that if one were to escape the cave, one could find themselves in a slightly wider and more attractive cave?
you know what? Anything's possible. I mean, as you're describing it, I'm thinking to lucid dreaming.
Yes.
And method dreaming, that you can go, the idea of the movie Inception, you can go several levels down and the reality is different.
Yes.
Yeah. And but also when you start talking about, are we in a simulation, then I hear, or what pops into my head is Elon Musk.
Yes. And it's interesting actually, because if we are in a simulation, it's a simulation created by ourselves. And I'm wondering whether or not we are whether we think that the simulation is a simulation, is actually a matrix programming of thought. And one of the attractions, I imagine, of being inside a cave is that one can create the cave as they so wish. And if they choose to interpret dancing flame shadows as prison guards, then they do. If we choose to interpret Brexit as the worst thing that could happen to Britain, then we do. But equally, we could choose a different structure of the cave.
That kind of leads me to this new rabbit hole that's just recently been emerging, which is the idea that if we look at the singularity, it's really about humans. So then I have started to notice a connection between the singularity, dualism, and universality. And if you know the shape of the torus, so depending on where you look at it, it looks like it's one thing, it's two opposing things, or it's one connected. And that's kind of a pattern that I'm starting to see and think about in terms of linking that to this idea of our reality and our interpretation, or our views around technology.
Yes, and funny enough, when you've said the word when we look at, and that's one of the things that is quite amazing about our real state, is that the electron is actually probability based. So it only appears when it's observed. So what's bizarre about ourselves, in fact, and all what we would class as reality, is that it's purely observational. There is nothing that isn't subjective. And in the fact that 99.9999999% of everything is actually dark matter, energy based, and there's only one micro fraction that's actually real matter. The structures that we're talking about are actually all observational. So I would proffer that everything is the cave, and so there is only what we observe, because what we do know is that if we don't observe it, it isn't actually there. So now we're talking in the kind of the split experiments or Schrodinger's cat. There is no uniformity or predictability of any form of atomic structure that isn't observed. And as soon as we stop observing it, it ceases to be where we thought it would be. So everything is the cave.
Well, but I think, yes, I think that could be right, because then when I was earlier speaking about, when the person leaves the cave and the idea of what they see outside the cave is real, that's reality. Again, it's based on perspective.
New cave.
Yeah.
So let's. So now we've. So starting from.
I feel like we're in a Star Trek episode. We're creating a Star Trek episode.
We are. Someone one day will make this into a film, right? So we've got that.
That's part of what I want to do. I want to create a documentary series around this whole. My bigger idea is to do some psychogeographic research.
Good.
And so go to different countries, cities, towns, whatever, and really explore the technologies that they're using and the rituals and the processes to categorize that and look for the patterns. Because at the moment, if you notice at the beginning, I said that Western society, because that's my current echo chamber. And I really want to go and explore more of that. So the idea is to go and do some psychogeographic research, but do it as a documentary series. So that's kind of what I'm working on. Need some support for.
Good. Okay, well, let's do the plugs at the end for anyone. Yeah. Although you're not hard to find on adaparis.com, but we will do the plugs.
That's where I think I'm heading to, is to explore. I don't have the answers myself. I've been looking at this for 5 years. And so having conversations with people like such as yourself and being part of this podcast is to test and validate and query.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm thinking.
So let's keep going. Let's go from so we've looked at what the subjectiveness of reality. Let's talk about, if you allow, it's either the first or second line. No, it's in the first sentence of your article, where it says that that there are more and more people looking for a new religion, and you've qualified that earlier by saying that something greater than us.
Yeah.
Now we know that the main differences between humans and other animals is that, one, we're aware of our mortality. Second is that we desire to be socially fit. And the third is that we have a curiosity about something that's other, or something that's greater than ourselves. So is it that we are now starting to seek something greater than ourselves? Or is it that that's part of the human driving force of evolution?
I think it's part of the driving force of human evolution.
Yeah.
Because I think that we've always done that.
Yeah.
And what's different now, which is why I think we are living in a really exciting time, is because a lot of technology has been commoditized. So people have more access to information. I was having this conversation the other day. If you go back centuries, the only people who had access to particular types of technology, I'm talking books, were the priests and the church. And they would decide what was dictated and what was passed down to people, what levels of information. And then you had the printing press, and so books became a commodity. People were able to educate themselves. And I think that that's what's happening now, because access to the internet means that people have choice. They are able to make decisions with relative amounts of informed choice. And that is why there is that curiosity to find more. Well, how does this relate to me and my story? How does it relate to my position within society, cultures? How can I connect with others?
Yes. And it's interesting that you mentioned about the Bible part of that, because back in the olden times, meditation was for the elite, whereas the Bible was for the working classes. And who we would class now as philosophers used to be the leaders.
Yeah.
The whole concept of the royal family and government actually came as an overthrowing of philosophy. So the actual lineage, which isn't taught in any schools that I can find, especially not in the Western world, was argument, reasoning, and logic, and then philosophy. Then an overthrowing of that by powers that found philosophical thought and critical thought to be the antithesis of what they would be able to control.
Mm-hmm.
And we enter in the academic system in the Western world, we enter that story at Socrates' death. But what we don't see is the story that led up to that, from the thousands of years, where the leaders of people would be those that questioned things and hypothesized about things.
Yeah.
And so, and where I'm going with this is a neat, hopefully neatish conduit toward your concept of cyborg shamanism, such as that the those that are fascinated by and utilize technology can also be the thinkers and leaders and healers in this world.
Yeah.
And so when I first read your article, for instance, my starting point was, so actually what you're suggesting is that we reverse the constructs that we've made specifically in the last 2,500 years, back to a state where those users of technology for greater good and individual well-being are the new guard.
Yeah.
Is that what you were suggesting?
Yes. So, yeah, because actually there's so much in there with just what you've said, because for me, the idea of, so, okay, when I do a lot of keynote speaking, and when I go to prepare something, I always go back to the quote. I'm a storyteller, and the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you what to think, but to give you things to think upon. And I think that is what's happening. Just the way that you've described things, I think that we are moving towards, although there seems to be an emergence of people who are critical thinkers and philosophers who also understand the technology. So that's where the idea of cyborg shamanism came from. It's cyborg, if you look at cyborg as it's using technology to augment our humanity. So that means by wearing glasses, effectively, by definition, I could be a cyborg. Shamanism is not about one particular guru, it's about serving. And so it's people who are using technology, to serve or to do things that are greater than themselves for the greater good. So not just I'm doing this because it's good for me.
Yes.
And I think that understanding and that wisdom comes from the being philosophical and being a critical thinker and asking questions. And what I like to think that I'm trying to do is not go in with the answers, because I don't, and I think that would be arrogant, but I'm going in and I'm helping or encouraging people to ask themselves more questions, to be more curious and to be more philosophical and to be critical thinkers, whilst also looking at their own relationship with and control and power with technology.
Yes, and I think it's I'm not being facetious here, it could not be a more worthy time or act or project or effort to execute than now and this. You mentioned in what you've just said, and also in your article, a kairotic time, kairos being a chronological statement from the ancient Greeks, of where this kind of seems to be arguably kind of like a perfect storm of, and now this, I would call that the second axial age. So the first axial age was kind of, or the Axis age, as it's also known, is a period when roughly at the same time around most of the inhabited world was that the great intellectual, philosophical and religious systems came into shape, and subsequent human society and culture emerged. So you've got the ancient Greeks, but you also got the Indian metaphysicians, you've got magicians, you've got Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Persian Zoroastrianism, you've got Hebrew prophets, the 100 schools. So that time, which was around 800 BC to 200 BC, that axial age, I'm wondering whether or not we are now in the second version. I was almost going to say the second coming. That's another rabbit hole. The second version of an axial age. I sense check myself on this, because I feel so enthused by that being the case that I need to be careful that I'm not using my own certainty bias or my own choice supportive bias of saying, well, of course this is the right time, because actually it's super handy, because that's the kind of stuff I'm writing about in my books and what I'm saying on stage. And but what evidences have we got that we are at some form of, whether it's a kairotic age or an axial age, what are we, is this a presumption or an assumption or a hypothesis, or do we have enough evidence to say that there is a moment in time where this is happening?
I feel that I am currently making an assumption, but based on the trends, the word trends, based on a lot of the information and the things that I'm seeing. So there are more and more people writing about this. You have kind of Umar Haque and Yuval Noah Harari, and you have different thinkers who are talking about this. When you look at, you know, what's happening with the far right and Brexit and America and all of these different things, when I look at articles around them, they're still talking about the fact that everything is cyclical and it's a pattern and the time is now and we are approaching this. So I'm connecting the dots between different worlds that are talking about the same thing, that we are in a particular moment in time.
Yes.
And I would love to be able to speak to some people or quantify that in some way. I suppose part of my background is that I did a pure and applied maths degree. And so it's always been about looking for patterns, you know, in vector spaces, and looking for patterns and bringing these things together. And I think that's how my brain works. Yeah. And I think that what I'm doing at the moment is seeing this and looking in different worlds and saying, oh, it's very, just like how I came up with the idea of cyborg shamanism. I see that being spoken about in economics, and I see it in politics, and I see it in art, and I see it in humanities, and I see it in these different worlds. All people are talking about it in those different worlds. And all I'm currently doing is bringing those together.
Well, and to go slightly full circle, well, can you go slightly full circle? That's not too much. Back to the point about observation and objective reality. If you've observed it, then it exists purely by virtue of the fact it's been observed.
Yes, but I'm also very mindful that I'm not creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not, which is why after 5 years of looking at this on my own, I'm going out and actively speaking to other people.
Yeah.
And having my ideas challenged, which is great.
Yeah. And I guess it's kind of like no one knows as much as everyone, right? So it's actually kind of our ideas, and none of us need to be. And that's why I've always been concerned about this term thought leader. It concerns me almost as much as the term futurist, and I get
I get it.
Most of my stage instructions include the word thought leading futurist. So, but
have you seen the article, the Boston Chronicle article, "Know Thy Futurist"?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is that is to just ask about and go into peek over the edge of the rabbit hole of whether or not it is that we are searching for something greater than ourselves, rather than, or is that at the expense of searching for our truest self?
Well, that then leads into another bit that I was thinking about: is this really a form of escapism?
Yeah. I was gonna go there next.
Yeah. Is this really? I don't know. Is this really a form of escapism? Because if I think about VR, and I've worked as a futurist and what have you, but when I think about VR, one of the things, and VR has been around for years. It's not anything new, but one of the things that always not bothered me, but concerned me, or made me think more about bringing the human into it, was this idea of escapism, because it's quite a solitary thing. You have, a headset on, and was it the Uncanny Valley video? Yes, I think you sent that to me ages ago. And the idea of going into that virtual world to escape what's happening in the real world and negating our own sense of responsibility and power and all of that.
Yeah.
That is a similar analogy for me in terms of looking for something, the way that I use the idea of religion, but looking for something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
That's okay, as long as we don't lose sight of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Funny enough, to be totally transparent, the only word in your article that jars, and this is down to my story and my bias rather than anything that anything you've done, it was actually the word religion.
I know it would for a lot of people. Yeah,
and it kind of and it's purely based on the fact that I associate the term religion with dogmatic theism. and I don't associate religion with an internalizing, philosophizing realization of one's truest self. I see them as markedly different to such an extent that I've read your article at least a dozen times, and I think that I replace now, when I see the word seeking for a new religion, I replace it with belief system. And, but it's a twin system wording, and it's semantics to some extent.
But it's a deliberate choice of words.
Yeah.
Because I know that everybody, well, I say everybody, most people will have some personal attachment, emotional attachment to the word religion. Because I was brought up Catholic, convent school, you know, we had prayers before each lesson, we had an altar in every classroom. I know what that feels like. And so to use the idea of religion as, you know, it is about connecting with yourself and your purpose and your being, but through guiding principles and values and this sense of community, you know, because I remember saying to my mom once when I decided that I didn't want to go to church anymore, you know, she said, "Oh, but you have to go to church." And I said, "But church is not the physical building."
Yes.
Yeah, church is not the physical building; it's the other bits. And so,
yeah, I see that. I mean, I guess I'm a bit of a reductionist by nature. So my way of viewing religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially in personal gods or God. But I accept it as, from an intellectual level, from the plural nouns of a particular system of faith and worship, or a pursuit or interest followed with great devotion. So if it's kind of on those plural nouns, then it makes it more. But I have a personal view which I'd love to run past you. That is that I reckon that what we're searching for is toward consciousness.
well,
I think we're heading.
Funny you should say that, because I think that so along this 5-year path, what kept popping up is the idea that the singularity is really about human consciousness. It's humans. It's not technological. It's not technological in that sense.
That's right.
And so,
I mean, we are the technology. So yes.
Yeah. So that is a part of it. And I think on my website I briefly talk about the idea of moving towards a conscious Anthropocene.
Yes.
In that we have a more conscious awareness, reality in relation to our impact that we're having on the world.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's it. And that's what I think that's probably the thing that kind of excites me the most, is that we, whatever happens, we are becoming more aware of the environment. And I mean that in the broadest possible sense. I mean it in 3 contexts: on an intrapersonal environment, an interpersonal environment, and an extrapersonal environment.
Okay, and what you describe is what I call my 4 freedoms. So the 4 freedoms philosophy framework is that. It's that essentially, how do you create human blockchains? Humans' ecosystems of trust and transparency. And for me, the journey, again, another set of patterns has been, first of all, it starts with self. How are you bringing your full self to identity? How are you bringing your full self to everything that you do? We have multiple personas, all these different things. How do you bring those all together and be almost unapologetically yourself? The second is culture, which is collective storytelling. So what's the gap between the external story and the internal behaviors? Where are the power and responsibilities lie? So me as an individual, where does my power and responsibility lie within making sure that I bring my story up into the cultures which I find myself or choose to inhabit? And as cultures, as systems, what's the power and responsibility of making sure that we're not othering people, but we are also bringing other people's, bringing stories into different perspectives? The third is economics, and that's not about money. It's about the process of economics. So production, consumption, impact, and how you make that sustainable. And that is also in the systems process. That's also when you can start to look at which technologies you then bring in to help try and shape some of that. And what I've found is that when you work on the first three, so identity, culture, and economics, the fourth chain is the ecosystems, because you end up in this human blockchain. So decentralized system, trust and transparency, people recognize their potential and their value. You have a system, the idea is that you have a system or structure that is working towards human potential. And that is a measure of success. Human potential in the economics of our existence is also a measure of success.
I love this, because that what you've just said, that I love it because I'm biased more toward that type of thinking. I see that as the antithesis of seeking something greater than oneself. So I think that because for instance, let's take a human blockchain. Let's take a decentralized decentralized, and for those without wanting the technology terms in terms of that type of technology terms, let's take an organism like a starfish, which is a decentralized organism. The parts of its life are distributed all over itself, which is why if you cut off a starfish leg, the starfish grows a new leg, but the leg becomes a new starfish. Whereas you have a spider, which is a centralized organism, and if you cut off the spider's legs, it can't move, it can't eat, it dies. And if you cut off a spider's body, then obviously it's dead anyway. Whereas starfish, there is no one thing. I would see Western religion, especially Western religion, as a centralized structure. And I would see non-Western religions as more decentralized. But equally, one could look at companies. So Wikipedia is arguably more decentralized than something like Google. And there are lots of subnotes to that, one of which being that's why almost all the time Wikipedia have a thing saying, please donate. It's extraordinarily difficult to monetize decentralization. However, and now going around the backside of that particular rabbit hole edge, I like the Nantan, the Apache Nantan belief system, which was totally decentralized. There was no words for you should or I am. It all was we are. Whereas you have someone like the Aztecs, who had a centralized system, which is Montezuma's City of Gold, which made it far more easy to attack and conquer by the Spanish than the Spanish found the Apaches, because the Apaches didn't have one leader. They were all leader.
Well, that now makes me think about Extinction Rebellion.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And what's your take on that?
Oh, on Extinction Rebellion?
Yeah. We're that far down the hole now. We may.
Well, okay. Let me come back to that point. I just wanted to say, go back a moment. So what I'm doing is, where I'm heading with all of this is that cyborg shamanism here, and using the four freedoms as the lens through which to observe and do the research.
Good. I like that. Well, that makes a lot of sense, because if you have essentially you have a thesis. And your thesis has got a structured academic approach to how it can be validated. Question. And then you'll have a conclusion that drops out the other end of it. May then retrospectively add to your four freedoms, may adjust them or whatever. For instance, one of the things that I suspect may come out of this approach is that a lot of those four freedom, the economic view of that is actually in decisioning, and what technologies we use for decisioning criteria of our thoughts, and therefore how we believe. But nonetheless, so the conclusion comes out of a structured approach to a thesis. Yeah, that's smart.
You saying decision, instantly my brain goes, oh, the decision trees.
Which by the way, I see economics as. So I don't, as soon as you say the word economics, I hear the word decisions.
Okay. Yes. So I say choices.
Awesome. And it's smarter. Right. So go.
Extinction Rebellion.
Finish on this point. Actually, this is a lovely point because you're actually inside this area of a rabbit hole that many people don't go to. So let's just go around that for a bit.
The Extinction Rebellion bit. Okay, so let me qualify this by saying I don't know much about the inner workings of them.
Okay.
But I feel that they have been able to mobilize people in a way that has been unprecedented in terms of activism. So
Yeah.
to me, activism doesn't mean you have to go out on a protest march. I think activism starts with you. And it starts with, I know there's something I want to change. And
Yes.
you have an idea of what that would look like once it's changed. So there's a measure of
Yeah.
from one point to the other, knowing I know that this is what I would want to change.
Yes.
You then find your voice and you find a way of using your voice. And Extinction Rebellion has been very good at helping everyday people to say, I can make a difference. I
Yes.
can find my voice. Then you go into, okay, so now I know what it is I want to change. I know why I want to do it for myself. I know what it is, how it's impacting my story. I know what I want to change. I now need to find the others. And they have been very good at making that happen. What I've just described, again, is the four freedoms: identity, culture, economics, ecosystems.
Yes.
And so I think that it's really smart. I think there are issues. There are issues with anything that I think potential issues is because my understanding of it is that anybody can set up, there's training and what have you, but because anybody can set up and say, we are Extinction Rebellion and we are going to protest this in this particular way, it leaves a space open for the outliers, for people who have their own motivations or their own belief systems. So sometimes it's not necessarily that there's an issue with the message, it's the way that the message is being construed, or the way that the message has been shared that becomes part of the problem. And
Yeah.
so lots of people come out and disrupting and encourage, I was speaking to somebody else at a festival the other weekend, speaking to some people there, people being encouraged to go and get themselves arrested when they don't have the support systems even though it's a decentralized organization, the support system to be able to give people access to the information they need to be able to then deal with that if it happens.
Yes.
So I think that's where it becomes sticky.
Yeah, and by the way, there is great evidence of decentralized systems with support networks. Alcoholics Anonymous being one. It's totally decentralized. There is no one leader. There is the guy Bill who created the 12 steps, but that there's no fame or centralization of that. One of the things that I think about in terms of existential rebellion and movements is there's a great book called Propaganda in 1965 by a French sociologist called Jacques Ellul, E-L-L-U-L.
It's interesting. Can I just cut you? You said existential rebellion.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Right, let's coin that for a start. Yeah. And one of the things with rebellion, however, in general, one of my favorite versions of it was Che Guevara overturning the Cuban Batista regime using Radio Rebelde. He created a radio station using an open frequency and mobilized many people. But the biological structure of that type of approach started in a very similar way to as you speak of actually understanding the change that you want to see and then finding your voice inside that and mobilizing others that actually. The Berlin Wall fell from action, and again, history books don't teach it, schools certainly don't teach it. It was actually a student protest. It started as a student protest with a couple of people protesting, and eventually over time, outside the GDR building, over time, the volume of belief was unpoliceable. And that's I'm interested in that.
But that's why I also find the Extinction Rebellion brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it's going back to our previous point, it's a kairotic moment.
Yes. Or an axial moment.
An axial moment.
No, it is.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just,
I'm agreeing with you. We're going to call it axial kairotic moment. So I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. One of those things that because we were supposed to speak last week, right?
Yes.
So I've been looking forward to this one for this particular endless rabbit hole meandering, which we can do. And we usually, I mean, I think we've pretty much always had chats along this route. So it's great to have one on video. Where should people go to find? I'm gonna link to your site, and I'm gonna link to the article. Is there anything else that you would like to mention or promote or ask for now? Because the floor is yours.
So what I have done is I have created a Slack channel for Cyborg Shamanism, and anybody who is interested in being a part of that development. I don't know, and I think, I don't know what it's going to be, but there's a Slack channel where I am looking, and I'll send you the link,
please,
where I am, it's different verticals, and there's religion, there is rituals, there's storytelling, all of these different things. But anybody who wants to be a part of that, to contribute, great. As I said, I would love to do this as a piece of research, but also do create a documentary series out of it. I am in the process of creating a podcast. So because the documentary is going to take a while, I'm in the process of creating a podcast series. And so looking to have, much like this, conversations. But places to find me, go to my website. I'm about to update that a bit more. And you'll make my contact details are there.
Great, good. I will publish all of these links.
Thank you.
And thanks, Ada, as well, for giving your time so graciously.
That's right. It's great because I love our conversations. We always do end up going down rabbit holes.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Yeah, I hope that the people who've watched this or are watching this in the future find this of some value, even if there's a nugget of information. I've realised in the last few months of recording these video podcasts that people catch one little thing. Yeah. Like I spoke about lucid dreaming in the last one, or the second to last one. I spoke about lucid dreaming for like 30 seconds, and that has made this chief exec from Canada has been inspired to bring me into the board of directors of the new weird, and it's just kind of all this strange. It's whatever, we're sprinkling seeds, aren't we?
Well, I mean, yeah. I was at TED in Vancouver. A conversation with somebody at a pre-party around Cyborg Shamanism has now launched all of this. So I'm speaking about it in. It's given me the confidence and the voice to just go, okay, I'm going to talk about it, and being approached by organisations to go in and then talk to them. So go in almost in-house as a futurist.
A futurist thought leader.
A futurist thought leader. Activist, futurist thought leader. There we go.
A future activist. I like it.
Future activist. Yeah. I mean, we could do a load of the names, but I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much again. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm gonna hang up now. I'm gonna press record. I'm gonna hang up, but I will publish this video, and the video is your content as much as it is mine. So, and anyone else who's watching this, by the way, if you're ever on any video with me, then I don't want to own the content. I want to make things shareable. So,
amazing. Good. Great. Thank you. Have a great week.